Welcome everybody to this week's episode of the Chant. This week I'm talking to my buddy Isaac Morehouse. Isaac is an interesting dude. He's got a cool background. He's started two businesses, Praxis and Crash, both of which are kind of in the education alternative and like job search alternative for Crash. Both are awesome products, and I can tell you we don't really talk about either one in this episode today. In fact, I came into this episode with a list of questions because Isaac's a really interesting, knowledgeable person on a lot of different issues, prolific writer, great thinker, and we just kind of started talking, and then the conversation just kind of went. So I kind of threw out all my notes, and we just kind of had a great talk. We ended up talking a lot about liberty and freedom. He and I both kind of come from, we'll say, libertarian-ish backgrounds, and we just talk about how to like market those ideas and how to spread those ideas, and how in the past year or two, all of that has been put into jeopardy. So it was just a great talk. It was very cathartic for me, and I think you guys will enjoy it. Isaac's a really compelling, interesting speaker. He tells great stories. I just think you're going to love this talk. As always, please remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with Isaac. Thank you. I think this is the first time we've ever spoken.
Isn't that funny? I think you're right. Because I was trying to remember. Yeah, we didn't do in-person opening seminars anymore by the time you joined Praxis. And yeah, I mean, by that point, I was out of the day-to-day. So you weren't talking to me and when you were, getting ready to go through or in your application process or any of that stuff. It's like, but like through Chuck and through your presence on the Praxis, community, and now through Twitter, I feel like I know you pretty well.
Same. I feel like, I feel you're one of the more interesting relationships I have. And part of me was almost upset to have you, like to actually like have a real life, or no, this isn't real life, but actually have a conversation with you, because I enjoyed the oddness of our relationship so much.
Yeah, well, then like it's like when you like a band and then you talk to them in person, or you hear them on an interview and you're like, oh shit, they're not as cool as I thought. No. I don't want to ruin anything here.
Right. Well, I mean, I've seen you do interviews. It's now I'm going to ruin myself because it's just.
I'm already disappointed in the long hair from your picture on Twitter.
I know. I'm sorry. I got rid of that about 3 weeks ago. So you just missed it.
It is. Yeah. It's funny how we're in that era where like if. I hope you're okay. You froze. It's my connection maybe does that, but we're in that era where like if somebody, you get so conditioned to their avatar picture that like if you interact with them somewhere and they're different than that, it's just it's like disconcerting,
Yes. I had that problem when I got this new job. All of my like internet, my LinkedIn, my website, it's all short hair me, very professional. But when I got the job, I was long hair, had a beard. I was going full like Rona hippie. And I was like, oh, this is going to be problematic when they first see me and they realize I've changed my look a little. So there is a certain like, I don't know, like you especially with that online presence, like, do I keep it updated or do I just like, whatever, we'll see what happens. But
it's a good study in like, I don't know, the power of symbolism or brand that you just associate, like I rarely change my picture on any social media stuff. I mean,
I don't think you should. I mean, unless
because I'm like, it's just, and like if people podcasts I subscribe to, I hate it when they change their logos, their image. I don't care if it's janky and out of date, out of style. I just want it. My brain does the work without me needing to think, and I don't want to have to think.
Right? Like unless you lose an arm, I don't think you should really update your profile picture all that often. Like I just don't. It's what you grow used to. Yeah.
So tell me about what is this show all about, man?
Great question. Not sure. Okay. It's more just like for whatever reason, my life has like led me to meet what I think are interesting people. And this is just a great excuse for me to talk to people about what they're interested in, which is always fascinating for me. I don't know if that's fascinating for you or other people.
Oh, yeah.
But I maintain that like listening to someone talk about what they're passionate about or what they're even curious about is one of the most entertaining things a person can like engage with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that's the best way to do a podcast, is to do it selfishly. So if you walk away entertained and felt like it was time well spent as the host, then it's a win, right?
That's how I view it. It's just like, this is my excuse to talk to interesting people about stuff that they're interested in. And hopefully I can have just like a great time. And, if other people take mirth in it, great. If not, don't watch it.
So how would you define your interests right now? Because I feel like I've either watched you evolve a little bit, or I've just gotten to know you more through your Twitter and seen different sides of you. But you have this very interesting, like, you seem to be an observer of the world at a distance, not too far of a distance, not too out in the clouds, but at like a distance where you're not in the muck with any current event type stuff, but you are like an interested observer and commenter on almost everything that happens at like a 10,000 foot level. And I'm curious how you would describe sort of your interests.
That's interesting. You're definitely right in that there's been kind of like an arc or a journey. I should actually thank you, because I would argue that Praxis kind of launched that. Before that, I was in the system. I was thinking like, you're like my Morpheus. You like pulled, yeah. I don't know if that makes me Neo, but it definitely means I'm out of the Matrix because of you. I'm like waking up covered in slime. That was my first impact in Praxis, just covered in slime, trying to figure out everything. And so it's been a lot of just like unshackling myself from the institutions that we're in, and like the boomer wisdom that I had followed so well and got really good at. So there has definitely been that arc. In terms of like a commenter and a viewer, I don't know if that's intentional. I would say I have a background in, like, I loved stand-up comedy. I loved improv comedy. That, when I was younger, I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. So viewing yourself in that role, I don't know. It's hard to put yourself like, I would agree. Like, I'm not like a foot soldier, but I enjoy watching the battle. No doubt about it. I love seeing the battle, and I love commenting on the battle and being snarky about it.
Yeah. You seem to be able to think about and comment on almost anything without me getting the impression that it like riles you up or gets under your skin. You have like an appropriate, dispassionate, you know what I mean? Like, so you seem to have your psyche is well balanced. So whatever you read on Twitter isn't going to mess up your mood for the day.
Well, yeah, it won't. Don't give me that much credit. I don't know if it's balanced.
I mean, that's a hard thing to achieve though today, to both be plugged in, to like be in the sort of very online person world, and not be like have your emotions not be in reaction to it all the time emotionally.
Sure. Yeah, I guess so. It's like, it's fun. This is like, I used to be a big sports fan, and then I was just like, screw it. Politics is more fun. There's more consequences. I used to love, like, big Miami Dolphins fan, big Detroit Tigers fan. Still am a fan, but like.
Are you from Michigan?
I am. I'm a Michigan guy.
I forgot that, because I knew you went to Hillsdale, correct?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that, but I didn't know you're from Michigan. So, dude, I've got my, my Lions hat over here. We're I don't know if you're a Lions fan, but I'm a depressed Lions fan. So.
No, I'm a Dolphins fan because I'm originally from the Florida area, and I inherited that from my dad.
Lucky you.
But then I picked up baseball later on, like that. Remember that one good season we had in 2007?
Oh man, I'll never forget that.
The Maglio season. Oh,
that was incredible. So my birthday is October 11th, and I don't remember if it was on the day of my birthday or we were just celebrating, but we had all my family over for my birthday that year, and we had the game on, and it was like, I'll never forget. Like, sports can occasionally give you these moments that are like transcendent.
Yeah.
And as a lifelong, Tigers fan and whatever, and I was born in 83, so I was too young when they had been good previously in like 86 or whatever. I don't remember that.
Sure.
But by the time I was really into baseball, they just weren't very good, right? No. And we had that season, and everybody's over at my place for my birthday, and I'll never forget. My dad is in a wheelchair. He was in an accident when I was 3 years old, and he has no short-term memory, and he needs 24-hour care. But he remembers long-term memories from before the accident, and he was a sports fan then. And so he would when we were watching sports, if you're sitting there with him, he'll ask you every 5 minutes, who's playing? How are they doing this year? He'll ask you the same questions. You'll converse. He'll forget about it 5 minutes later. Who's playing? How are the Tigers doing this year? And he'll ask about guys that have been retired for like 20 years, But like paying attention more than he usually is. And I remember Maglio hits that home run to send them to the World Series. And we were all just like going crazy. And my dad in his wheelchair, he doesn't like follow things close enough usually to express something like that. He like cheered. He was like, yeah, he like, and I just never forget. It was like this poignant moment for me that, the Tigers gave me. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's my favorite thing about sports is it has that moment. It's got that like, you do feel it, but at the same time, you're not a part of it. Like, let's be honest, we can't affect the team. I don't care how hard you root. Even when you're at the stadium, you're one of whatever 50,000, so you don't really matter that much. But it is fun, and you can kind of live vicariously through it.
Well, TK Coleman, a good friend of mine, and you know him from Praxis. He and I always talk. He always says that like sports is the area where he voluntarily chooses to make something unimportant important so that he can gain the benefit. So he chooses to legitimately get frustrated and suffer when his team is suffering. Even though he knows it doesn't matter, he chooses to pretend it matters and engage in that because being a part of that has such a great like payoff. It's like a form of escape that if it doesn't mean anything to you, you don't get any real benefit either. But if it really pains you when your team loses and you get ticked at the refs or whatever, you choose to enter into the make believe in a way that just makes it a great experience.
Oh yeah, that's the best part. Like that's like, if I were like a Yankees fan or like one of these dynasties fan, like if I were a Patriots fan, I don't think that'd be fun. The fun is in the suffering and then like the hope. The hope is fun. Hope is fun. Winning, constantly winning and expecting to win. I don't know if that's as much fun. Maybe it is. I've never rooted for a team like that, so I don't know, but it might just be a justification for myself.
No, it's very hard to relate to. I've just always found it like, I've always been kind of turned off. I've been around a lot of people like this in my life because I was, worked in libertarian nonprofits and whatever, and a lot of like intellectual, rational type people and like anti-collectivist types and whatever, which, I share a lot of those things, but they're always like, oh yeah, sports ball. Like it's this tribalistic, you get so mad about a team, you have no control over it. And I'm like, I'm choosing to, this is wonderful for me,
Oh, it's a blast. And then I maintain like, that is something that annoys me about like that. Like I love like rugged individualism, big fan, all that stuff. But like the most fun I've ever had in my life is like a concert, sea of people. We're all rooting for the same thing. Or we're all like, bobbing our head, whatever. I don't care. Like, we're part of a crowd. I'm part of the mob mentality, whatever. It's a blast. Okay. That's some of the most fun you can have as a person. And to like rob yourself of it is just, don't do it to yourself.
And I think that's one of those great opportunities too, that, I struggle with this myself, but I work hard to try to adopt this mindset rather than denigrating something that appears irrational or silly, but people seem to love. See if you can like figure out what they love and learn from it. So I remember you hear that, you probably heard this at churches too, where churches will be like, pastor will be like, yeah, well, you come to church and you're afraid to raise your hands or cry out to God, or you're too embarrassed, but you go to a sports stadium and you'll cheer for your team. And instead of trying to make you feel bad for what comes natural and easy at a sports stadium, maybe like try to ask the question, like, why does that come naturally? Why do people do that? What is it about the spirit of being in a stadium that makes people not embarrassed to do that? Is there a reason that they don't do that at church? Is that a bad reason or is it a good reason? What is going on here? Can we learn from this instead of trying to denigrate it and make people feel bad for what they naturally like? Not like anything you're naturally drawn to, you should, celebrate, like, whatever. You could be addicted to things that are bad for you. But I think that the initial instinct, and this kind of comes from my economic training, right? Like if you see behavior that looks irrational, before you condemn it as stupid, try to understand what it's doing work for people. It's doing something valuable for them,
Yeah. Oh, and I despise the term irrational with all of my heart. Cause like, I don't, I mean, I think we both know this. Utility theory says that no one really does anything irrationally, right? They're maximizing their utility. So like there's a reason for it. You may not like the reason. It may fly against what you want, but there's a reason. And like it's probably fun. I don't know. I mean,
it's like given the information and incentives and constraints that they face.
Yeah.
They deemed this action to benefit them in some way. Now you can think that their information is wrong or their incentives are bad, but like try to learn what it is that's making that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like empathy. I know, shocking to think that like economics people or libertarians or any of that good stuff like do empathy, but I'm pretty sure that's the definition of empathy is, you know, like putting yourself in their shoes to understand their indifference curves.
And it's humility too. And that's kind of Hayek's great insight at, you know, what the task of economics is to teach men how little they, you know, know about what they can design, to just like, I don't really understand how all these phenomena work and why seemingly bizarre behavior can have some sort of beneficial effect that I would not have predicted myself. You know, that's like keeping that level of humility intellectually. It's what keeps you curious and keeps you from being, you know, condescending and dangerous.
That's where the fun's at. You know, the fun is in not knowing. Would you say Hayek is your favorite economist?
Mises.
You quote him a lot. Mises? Okay.
Mises by a mile. Yeah.
Really? All right. Yeah. Interesting.
People often say that Mises, and I've never understood this. Oh, well, he's a more difficult to read. He's not as clear of a writer or whatever. I feel like he's way clearer than Hayek.
I agree with you. So I liked Mises a lot more. He's very, I don't know, maybe I just read enough of it that it made sense. Because like I went to Hillsdale and have an econ degree there, so they forced me to read Mises.
Yep.
And it's just, I don't know, I grew to like his writing style. And then I read Hayek and it's a little more, I don't know, is it flowery or it's a little more, I don't know.
He's got a lot of, he actually reminds me a little bit of Jordan Peterson in this way. He's got a lot of caveats and carve outs and like 7 commas per sentence because he's like, you know, perhaps in some cases under certain conditions, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Mises is a lot more, this is how it is. You know, he's very boom, boom, boom.
Very much.
In that German, well, he's not German, but you know,
and like English as a second language blows me away. He's so clear and concise, and like, I love his. Did you ever go down to? I don't know if it was there when you were at Hillsdale. I imagine it was, but they have this room in the library where they actually have
it's haunted.
That he wrote like human action on or whatever. You can like go and like touch it and sit there. And, you know,
you go in the library. No one ever goes in there. It's quiet. It's creepy, but it's like it's there. Yeah, I remember that.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that's a good point. Hayek is I feel like Hayek would be good as a lecturer.
Yeah.
I think, because I would say like Jordan Peterson, I read his first book. It was okay. Like it was a slog. Whereas I do think as a lecturer, he's quite captivating and enjoyable.
Yeah. There's something in, I feel this way about like I really enjoy reading Ayn Rand. And I think I like people who just say things in declarative sentences and are like, this is the case, this follows from this. If I disagree with it, that's fine. It's just more economical for me to know what they're trying to say really quickly. That doesn't bother me. But when someone's speaking, that definitely comes off in a different way. It's a little more abrasive. It's not as inviting. They don't feel as human to you. So like someone who's more, you know, a little bit rambly and a little bit more questioning and things like that is, I think that actually helps in a spoken word setting.
Yeah, they're more approachable. Or if someone just like declared things at you, you'd be like, man, you need to lay off. I'm tired of this. Like, why are you shouting at me? Yeah.
But that's how I like to write. I try to write that way.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like it's so much more. I remember I read Scott Adams has this really short blog post, The Day You Became a Better Writer. And it's so short and it's phenomenal. I've read it several times and literally just like, you just strip out everything unnecessary, get really economical, get to the point, but and like that and just some of the writers that I've admired and the writing style that always feels right when I'm done writing it, I feel the best is when I remove the passive voice, I remove all the fluff and filler words and I just get right at it. I tend to like that better.
Okay. So you're like that Hemingway kind of style almost. That's
more, at least I aspire to be. I don't think I do it well, but I aspire to, which is ironic because in spoken word, I'm way like, I think one of my biggest weaknesses is that I talk too much. I just talk too much. I can be a motor mouth. And it's much easier for me to get concise in writing.
Yeah, but that's the nature of the medium, right? With writing, you can edit. Like, there's no editing this. You can't edit what you just said. Like, that's
Well, that is true, but it's weird. I don't edit my writing like
you don't
almost ever.
for sure.
Literally, when I write blog posts and articles, I just sit down, I write it all in one setting, and I can write really fast. Like I can write a 1,000-word essay in like 30 minutes or something.
Wow.
Just cold. I don't start with outlines or whatever, almost ever. I just have an idea, I write it, and then I'm like, done, publish it. Occasionally after I hit publish, I'll go read it as a published thing because then it has like, it's like out there for real, and it makes me notice embarrassing typos and things better because people are, and I'm like, oh, people can actually read this, and I might go back and fix a few things. But I'm pretty. So it's weird. I've trained myself in writing to get more economical, even at like a first take. And in conversation, I'm just not good at that. I'm not good at. If I'm recording a video like for somebody like or doing a monologue or something, I can be pretty concise, but I'm not good at that conversationally.
Oh, interesting. Oh. I'm shocked because all of like I guess I'm the complete opposite. I'm a slow writer, or someone say terrible writer. And that like, so like editing is my like go-to. I have to have that outline. I'm not good at just go. It's like, no, I gotta have my outline. It's like, and even like every like, it's like starts with the outline and this point and this point and this point, and I just slowly like I build it out that way. It's very like the stream of conscious writing is just not a thing I'm comfortable with.
Did you do the blogging challenge when you were in Praxis?
I did, and I've done it. I did actually again this past month, and it does help. You get faster at it, and it does like it forces you to get creative.
That blows me away, though. That's so impressive that someone who is more detailed and does a lot of editing, like doing a daily blog challenge when you're that type of writer, I think is like an incredible feat. Incredible.
I mean, it was just like I want to become a better writer, so I'm just going to spend like an hour or two every day and write. I mean, I tried to go for I think like over 500 words to 1,000, and just like I'm just going to do it. I need to do this. I don't know. It just might be my mindset. Just like it needs to get done, so it'll get done. You know.
Have you found yourself? Because I've just been thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself reading less as you are listening more to audio, like podcasts and stuff like that?
No, I'm reading more now as I'm listening more now.
Yeah.
Is that in line with what you assumed?
Well, yeah. So as a consumer, I have found that the more I listen to doesn't really affect how much I read. I read roughly the same amount. Like I read a little bit during the day, and then I usually always read something at night when I'm laying in bed. Mm-hmm. But as a producer, as a creator, the more I do podcast type stuff, the less I want to write. And that's really weird because writing is honestly like my first love. I love to write. It always makes me happy to write. But I have found like I'll have an idea and I'll be like, oh, this is an interesting thought. You know what? Maybe I'll call up TK and we'll talk about it and we'll record it. And then once I've done that, I don't really want to write about it.
Oh, so that exhausts it for you?
I think so. I think like once I get that outlet valve, and this is where Twitter can be both a blessing and a curse too. Even if I have an idea, if I just tweet about it really briefly, then the pressure has been released from my brain, and then I'll never go sit down and write. This is why I don't write outlines, because if I write an outline or like a draft, oh, here's a post, I'll come back and flesh it out later. Once I've written the draft, all the pressure, the idea feels like it has to come out. And then if I just like let out a little bit, then I'm good. And then I never sit down and write the whole thing. You know?
Interesting. Yeah, no, for me, it's once I do that, it's like, I didn't formulate that right. I got to go back. I got to go tweak it. So like, even like I recorded a podcast yesterday and I brought up something that's on my mind. I can bring it up with you too, actually, because you're a good person to think about with this kind of stuff is, with Austrian economics and all that kind of stuff. It's been driving me crazy that, people don't moralize kind of the liberty side of economics, or at least they try not to. Like that's the mindset. And I, who is like marketer now and doing all this kind of stuff, I think that's bad. I think we should moralize it. I think we even had a quick Twitter exchange where I tried to moralize it, and you called me out on it and I agreed with you. Like that is my instinct as well, is to be like, no, we got to be a little bit more dispassionate about it, a little bit colder. And I think that like the Marxists haven't been, our enemy hasn't been.
Yeah.
Like they love the word exploitation, which I maintain that's a moralizing word. You are making a value judgment, and it moves people. And our side is, the seen and the unseen. It's like, no, the mark and his victim, or whatever. Like it's, and I'm fighting through that idea right now. So I throw it out on Twitter. I talk about it when I can with people who I think would understand. Like for me, it's like I have this idea out there. It's unshapen. It's like a ball of clay. I need to rip it apart, punch it in the face, whatever, and bounce it off people before I can really grapple it. I can't release it. I've got to shape it and mold it really hard.
Let's dive into that idea specifically. But before we do, just on it's funny the way that I tend to work. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm really very action biased, and I do things really quickly, and I'm a completionist. And so once something's checked off the list, it's done, it's out of sight, out of mind, and I move on, which is a strength in many contexts, but it can also be a major weakness. So I rarely give ideas, and I'm trying to get better at this, but the time they need to turn into something that I could really flesh out. So interesting idea, crank out 300-word blog post about it. Boom, it's out there into the world. Cool. Move down to the next thing, right? And I do that really rapidly. And then I'll notice that ideas will accrue over time. And those more in-depth things will get drawn out often in conversations like this. But I like how you described okay, let me go tweet about it. Let me go read some stuff. Let me go listen to some stuff. Let me go talk. And let me slowly let this form into a thesis before I put it out there into something more formal. I rarely let it take the time to get there,
Yeah. I mean, I think there's merits to both, because I was looking at your website and all that stuff. You're prolific with the amount of work you put out there. I was going to give you a hard time about the fact that you've never written a book, and then I went on your website. You've written 5 books. I was going to be when's the book coming, Isaac? And then I looked and I was oh, about 5 years ago. So
I actually just
So there's merit.
When you say written, that's somewhat generous. So there are 10 books that I've published. However, they're pretty much all, and some of them they're collections with other people. But they're pretty much all collections of blog posts or other essays that I've written over time. And then oh, there's a theme here. I got several hundred posts on this. Let me go and put this together into a book and, publish it, whatever. It's I've never sat down and written a long form book. I've done that for a very short book 2 different times, very, very short. But yeah, so for me, it's more the book is a byproduct of daily blogging that just sort of happens to, oh yeah, here's a book here. Let's throw that together and publish it, rather than the daunting task of let's write a book. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I get that. You're still producing though, and you can form something like that. And then my one, I made a little PDF book that's a giveaway on my website. And then it's also a collection of blog posts about Google Analytics and tutorials I made. So that's definitely a method for doing it that I've done. So I support it,
I love it. I love it. Okay. So let's talk about the
fact that,
the normative side of economic argument.
Exactly. And you're taught about that. Don't be positive, be normative in your statements, right? I always get it backwards. Maybe it's be cold and calculating. I always forget the exact term.
Yeah. Not cold and calculating per se, just to me in communication, I make normative statements all the time. I'm not merely trying to describe things in a way without offering my own opinion on what's right and wrong. I very much am normative, but I do it in a very declarative way usually. I don't feel the need to give tons of explainers. I'll be X, Y, and Z is terrible.
Right.
And then I might tell you what that means or what the implications are why, but I don't feel this need to many people disagree, but there are times when I just feel and I'll use language that's pretty all encompassing, even when there's nuance involved, because I'm a marketer too, right? I'm good at marketing copy. And so let's take my company crash.co. You go to the website and the first thing it says is burn your resume. And I say that all the time, burn your resume.
Yeah.
And people will be what if you're still going to take the you recommend where you send a pitch, but you also have a cool resume, and maybe there's a time where you could, why don't you say like, be more select? And I'm like, yeah, that's a given. Sure. Whatever. There are nuances, there are exceptions, but nobody, that's not compelling to anyone. You know?
Not for a second. Absolute
like,
statements.
Use your resume more wisely, you know? What the heck? What is that?
Be prudent with your resume. Yeah. Great rallying cry. You're really going to get the people with that one.
Okay. So this is a good segue though, into the, marketing these ideas. So I've thought about this for so many years, probably about 20 years now, that I've been really, really interested in, free market economics and like how to make the world more free and whatnot. And I think I even tried to write a paper once, on, I think I did, and it wasn't good, on, why the idea, like Mises would call it, like wertfrei, I can't speak German, but like value free, why economics is not value free, and it can't be. You can't really escape from that. And I don't know that I believe my own argument in that paper, but there's something really valuable about the approach that Mises advocates, and largely economists would claim that they advocate, though most of them do it badly, and they actually are packing all kinds of values and normative statements in there. But the idea that, look, let's just analyze what happens, cause and effect. And I don't need to have an opinion on whether it's good or bad if the unemployment rate changes or whatever else.
Right.
I can simply tell you, just like a physicist might, hey, if you put this here and it weighs more than this, it's going to make the thing go this way. Right? Useful to know. You don't have to say, don't put that there, it's bad. You don't want things to go this way. You can just describe, this is how things work. And Mises's argument that let's utilize the social sciences in that way. And most of the time you have to do it deductively, because there's usually way too many variables to be able to predict accurately. Oh, if you increase the minimum wage by $5, you will increase unemployment by 2%. Like, there's just way too many variables. You can't tell, but you can say deductively, based just on the logical nature of relationships, that all else equal, even though it never is, but if it all else were equal, when you make it illegal for people to offer their wages below a certain price, you're going to price out of the market the lowest skilled people. At least on the margin, right? That's a very clear, and you don't have to make that normative statement. So the ability to observe economics in that way and learn those causal relationships, I think, separate from the normative idea of what to do with those insights, is useful. However, most of the time when we're in the world talking about economics, we're doing it in a context that is already packed with normative assumptions, and everybody else is being, and they assume that you are anyway. Even if you're not, they're going to tell you that you are. If you're making a statement about causal relationships as an economist, they're going to be like, you love the rich, right? You can't, no one's going to be like, oh, thank you for that value-free assessment. They're going to assume. And so, like, rather than running from it. So I wasn't ripping on you when you made that tweet. I didn't not think you were. The notion that people who value free markets and understand the way economic relationships work ought to not run away from normative claims about what the effects are on the poor and how you don't want to do, or whatever the value is that you're looking for.
Right.
I agree. I'm totally cool with that. The specific example you were using of an income gap, strategically, I think maybe I have disagreement on the value of focusing on that, but the broader point I think stands. I think that's really important. So, like, to point out the human cost, and I think the Institute for Justice is a great example of this. They find people who are like some, hair braider in some city who like started her own hair braiding business, and then government passes a law that says you have to get a license to be a hair braider, and you need 1,000 hours of training and some, stupid to protect the big salon businesses from competition, right? And they will go right at, instead of being like, here's a bunch of stats about the dead weight losses of these, they'll be like, meet Sheila. She's poured her whole life into this. These are her clients. They love her. She's weeping because the government just took away her business from her. She can't afford to go get this training, yet she's amazing at. This is what economic central planning does to real people on the ground. Let her be free to ply her craft. It's immoral that you should take her business from her. Like, yes, more of that. You know what I mean?
I agree. I think that's the way to do it. I also think human beings are not
great at rationality. Like I know I just said like I don't like irrational, but like we're instinctual creatures, I would argue, and we're also narrative creatures. We like a story that makes more sense to us.
I don't think rationality is the word you were looking for. I think you were looking for something like, we're not good at calculating costs and benefits in the abstract. They need to be baked into a narrative structure, you know?
Yes. Or like, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Or like logic itself needs to be baked into a narrative structure. Like we're not just going to be like, well, if this happens and this happens, and you know, it's like, no, I do it because it'll make my dad happy. You know, like that's you know, that's how we do stuff. So I do think, you know, taking the economics and while it does have that value in kind of the X's and O's, as I think of it, we got to tell the story. We got to apply, like, I think we have to apply religious terminology to this stuff. Like I have a blog post I'm like working through. This is what I'm going through. Or I'm just like, inflation is sinful. It is straight up a sin. All right. Like it is, or disordered, or whatever word you want to use. And I think that communicates things so much more powerfully to people and would actually counteract what we know is terrible. We know Marxism is bad, right? We know it will kill millions and like thousands, like it'll be terrible.
Yep.
It is absolutely terrible. And it is a religion in and of itself, I would argue, because it makes predictions of the future. Like it's so like to just be like, well, let me tell you why they're wrong. And it's about labor theory of value. It's like, no, it's evil.
Yes.
You know, it's much easier to say it's evil other than well, let me tell you about human nature. And it's like, I don't need the lecture. I need someone to burn them at the stake is what I need.
I love that inflation. I wonder if I'm trying to think of words that
I'm playing around
sinful would resonate with religious people. What like predatory?
Predatory
like inflation is predatory.
Right. I actually wanted to say exploitive because I want to just steal that from the Marxists. Because it is. I mean, my like there's a lot of bad things to be said about inflation, but I think the main one we could really like is appeals to democracy. Because I'm in a post-democracy mood right now, where I'm like, do I really like this stuff? Probably not.
It's
really.
Hard not to be right now.
It's hard to like democracy these days.
Yeah.
But then, anyways, so like the best way is to like be like, no, inflation exploits the masses for the benefit of the elites. And I found a great document. It's not by an Austrian economist. It's by, what's his first name? Nicholas Oersma. He's a French bishop from the late Scholastic period. It was on Mises.org. And he wrote this piece called De Moneta. And he kind of breaks it down very like Aristotelian-wise, very like Aquinas, on why like inflation is in fact disordered. And I was like, this is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. It's not your average like economist. It's all that stuff. And it just really kind of digs into how like the prince is stealing money from his people when he has inflation. Or when he inflates and institutes coinage. And I just think I don't know, I hope that hits harder than, let me tell you about malinvestment and how it affects the business cycle and how the Fed is tied into all of this. No, the rich are stealing from you with inflation, and you let them get away with it by continuing to vote these people in.
How do you feel? Because this is always where things get challenging for advocates of free markets, because it's a really easy story to tell to just say, whatever the problem, let's go out there and blame it on the rich, because people that resonates with people. Everybody likes to hate the rich because they're jealous of them.
Robin Hood. Robin Hood story.
And like most of the wealthy people in this country, most of certainly the major corporations that are household names, they've got all kinds of horrible crony shenanigans that are using the government to crush their competitors. They're patent trolling like crazy. They're getting subsidies, whatever. So it's easy to say the rich, the rich, the rich. And I feel like there's something dangerous in that. Let's say you're successful in your campaign. Everybody going on a witch hunt for rich people, a rich hunt, I guess. Dad joke. I had to slide it in there.
I like it.
That's dangerous too, right? That's another kind of vice that I think probably has caused at least as much harm in the world. And trying to point out that like, it's not the existence of people who have made a way more money than most because they built a successful business that's a problem. In fact, in a functioning market, that's a sign of something good, right? That happens. It's the fact that you have a government powerful enough to move billions of dollars around and give it, and then these people are going to go curry favors. But it's just a less compelling story to be like, government is the problem, right? Regulations are the problem. It's like you want a guy, you want a rich guy with a monocle, you know?
Right. Well, that's Saul Alinsky right there. Another. So I've been reading a lot of like Saul Alinsky, a lot of these kind of
Rules for Radicals.
Rules for Radicals.
It's been years, man, since I've read that. Probably 15 years ago.
It's great. Reread it. It's so good. Reading all these like radical leftists makes me so mad that the right doesn't have compelling writers like the left does.
Yeah.
The right has really boring writers. But like, yeah, his whole thing is like find a target, isolate it, personalize it, polarize it, make that person your demon. Like, because then people can't be mad at like it's really hard for people to be mad at NAFTA, right? Like there's like, oh, you're mad at letters, but it's really easy for people to be mad at like the president of Mexico, you know?
Yep.
So it's, which is dangerous, right? Like those are witch hunts. Those are, in the French Revolution, they chopped those people's heads off.
There's something there though. I think if you're going to go the route of,
but like, what's the alternative? I guess that's my question.
Well, okay, so I'll give you a couple.
My thing is like I'm stealing the narrative from the leftists. I'm taking their playbook, and I'm just like, no, I want it, and I think
there are tactics there that are absolutely worth utilizing. So if you're going to go the route of let's find bogeymen and attack them,
and there are plenty,
there are absolutely plenty. I think finding, pick somebody that's already like a dislikable person on their face, right? Sure. Like a lifer in the Federal Reserve, or like the Treasury Secretary, or any of these guys that are revolving door between being a lobbyist and then being a CEO of some government contract company. That these guys are all just rent seekers, right? Mm-hmm. Guys and gals. And find that person who is so undeniably tied to the cronyist political system that it's very clear when you're attacking them, you're attacking their insider. They are using their influence and their insider position with the state, right? With the backing of force to do all this crap that hurts you, rather than picking a target that's like just a rich person who's maybe created a business that's created a ton of value, but it also has got a whole bunch of subsidies and other mixed up stuff, right? Like even though that may be fair, rather than like, okay, Elon Musk, his company's gotten a whole ton of subsidies. Probably not a target that's going to win you a lot of people. Right?
No, I agree.
Jeff Bezos, probably not. You could probably get away with that, but you'd probably rile up a bunch of socialist communists who want to kill him just because he's rich, right? Rather than be tax break from, whatever.
Yeah.
But here's the other thought. What about and I know this never plays as well in these games, but what about the positive side, right? Think about really good brands.
Mm-hmm.
The really good brands. I remember in the 90s, there was a big trend of big brands attacking their opponents, right? It was like Pepsi versus Coke. They'd always rip on each other. Nike versus Reebok. They'd always rip on each other. There's all these duopolies, Ford versus Chevy.
Yeah.
We kind of moved away from that. And I think Gen Xers kind of were down with that because they're more cynical as a generation. Millennials are more cooperative and they don't really like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But so now you look at the brands that are really successful. They focus on the positive feelings they can generate for you rather than the negative feelings that you will feel in their absence or with their competitors.
Sure.
Now think about that with markets. And Jeffrey Tucker good at this for a number of years. Now he's been very much focused on this coronavirus stuff, but he wrote a lot of articles and some books and things really talking about, and this is the spirit of iPencil, right? Like the beauty, the marvel, the positive virtues of the market, taking the offensive position and going out like, look at this. This is, and like, as somebody who's studied this stuff, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I'm literally brought to tears when I see things like, and this sounds weird and nerdy, but when I see things like the price of plywood where I live hundreds of miles away skyrocket when there's a hurricane down in Florida coming. Because I know what that means. It means that all sorts of people who don't even know about the hurricane and don't care about people living down there, they're going to curb their consumption of plywood so that plywood can go where it's needed. And that's literally going to save lives. And like, that's the market that gives me chills, right? And telling the story on a macro level, but especially a micro level of like the beauties, the beauty, the awe of free markets. And you can contrast it to like, especially people that have escaped horribly totalitarian countries, tell their stories who escaped and came to a country where they started a business and that wasn't possible elsewhere, right? And remind people of the beauty and the positive attributes, how capitalism makes us honest. I actually just published a new ebook, The Morality of Capitalism. I didn't it anywhere, but you can go get it on Amazon or whatever. It's like 99 cents. But it's a series of essays that I had written previously. But the one of the chapters is called Capitalism is Honest. And it's honest in several ways. It's honest about scarcity and things like that. But it's also, it makes us more honest. If you've ever been to a heavily regulated economy, a country that has a heavily, like worse than the US is, what do people do? Like, they hold money up to the light to make sure you're not giving them counterfeit bills. People don't trust each other in the market. So you have like intermediaries to make sure you're not getting ripped off in a free market, in a capitalistic economy. And I would say the retail sector in the US is probably the freest sector. It's still got some regulation, but it's way more free than most, which is why it's got the most variety, the best prices, the best competition, the best service. But you go in, you go buy fish from Kroger or whatever, you never once have to check the background of the person who prepared it to make sure that it's not poisoned. Ever.
Sure.
You can trust the shit out of the whole process, because it almost never happens, because the incentives are right. And people are so trusting in this country. You can leave your groceries in your cart and walk 3 aisles over, right? No one's going to steal your stuff. You don't have to look at the receipt and make sure that the lady at the checkout didn't double charge you and pocket the money, because that just never happens. People don't do that kind of stuff in the United States. And that's what markets give you. They build trust. They let strangers interact with, and I think taking the offensive and telling those stories is really powerful. It's really appealing to me, at least.
So I agree with you. And I love those stories as well. I don't think it will resonate with the public. I just think that the masses are spoiled children at this point, right? Like, what you said about capitalism is great, but
you've been reading a lot of H.L. Mencken or something?
I haven't. Is he saying this stuff? I need to read more of it. He's on my list. Him and Hoppe.
He hates the masses.
Well, there we go. I'm with him. But like we live in a democracy, so we've got to like sway them. But I just think it's, if capitalism's our dad, and it's provided greatness for it, like so much prosperity for us, that we're just like resentful that dad is successful and we live in a mansion and we take it all for granted. And like, yeah, maybe if we like send everybody on like a summer trip to Haiti and they can actually learn and gain some perspective, then maybe they'll appreciate what they have. But we can't send all of America to Haiti. That would just be crazy. So I just don't know. Like, in some sense, like, this kind of stuff worked under like when the Soviet Union was around, because it could be like, look at the Soviets, look at what they have. Right now, the only comparison would be like a China, maybe, and we could compare our freedom to their social credit system. I think that could be like an apt comparison, but that's more liberty based and not quite market based. It's slightly different. But I just don't. I don't think the people are there. I don't think they'd be receptive to that message. I think they've conflated capitalism with kind of this corporatism we have right now, to the point that if you were like you'd almost have to rebrand capitalism. You couldn't be like capitalism and markets have brought these things. You'd have to say like, I don't even know, cooperation and togetherness trade. I don't know. You'd have to recoin it, because like the Marxists and the leftists of the world have tainted capitalism, even though you and I both know our current system is far from capitalistic. Like, there's collusion between the government and the corporations, and there's tons of rent seeking, and we're in some sort of like hybrid state right now that is not like, they call like a mixed economy. It's more like authoritative mix, not just like socialism, which is allegedly good,
So I used to share your view that the way to increase the amount of freedom that, we experience is to give people better ideas, because ultimately the belief or the buying on what's politically possible, no matter what, right? In any kind of system, that's the ultimate constraint, because there's always more people than there are rulers, right? So and it's not what people want, it's what they will tolerate, right?
Exactly.
Because people will tolerate stuff that they don't want. Most people don't want most of the policies out there, but they'll tolerate them for public choice reasons. The benefits of trying to change them are small compared to the cost, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I thought, okay, so you just got to get better ideas. You got to market better ideas better to the masses. There's two problems with that I've learned over the years. And this is literally like this is probably the question that's animated me for 20 years more than any other. Is how does social change actually happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
The two problems I see with that approach. One is, the people that are willing to use violence in order to bring about whatever they want, socialism or fascism or whatever, They also have another tool in their toolkit that those of us who value freedom ought never to use, and that is dishonesty.
Yeah.
Lying.
Why not though? Why can't we do that?
We can, if you want to lose your soul and if you want to lose what you're trying to build. You can't
It's such a bummer.
You can't use, I'm going to give you the hope though. Just a second.
Give me the hope.
You can't use corrupt means and end up at a good end. I genuinely believe it. I think the universe is hardwired to where that will never work.
Right. And I agree with you, but I do flirt with that idea from time to time.
Yeah, and it's hard not to, right? It's hard not to. But I think you can do a lot more than just be like, well, I'm going to publish a paper with the facts because I'm not lying, right? You can be human, you can be empathetic, you can tell stories. But so that's problem number one. But problem number two, and I think because I tend to have the intellectual bent myself, for years and years and years, I dramatically overestimated the role of argument and ideas in shaping people's beliefs. And so I spent years, first I went to politics and I was like, it's not politics. Then I went into policy advocacy. I was like, okay, it's not that. Then I went into education. Like, okay, we got to like get the ideas communicated to the masses, whatever. Step one realization was ideas don't go from my head to the masses like that. They tend to flow in a way with more intermediaries. So you have ideas that sort of spread in less direct ways to people, like trying to argue the masses directly into some belief about policy almost never works.
Right.
Trying to convince a few people who are disproportionately influential before they become influential and they're too invested in whatever, when they're young up and comers, right? Finding the next Milton Friedmans or whatever and helping them see the way that markets work so that when they go to become famous or teachers or professors, they will have better ideas that will disproportionately filter down to people, right? Like most Americans believe ideas of John Locke's second treatise, but they've never heard of John Locke, right? They've imbibed this indirectly through the cultural narrative. So that was my first phase, right? Like, okay, so I want high leverage. I want intellectuals and influencers and help them before they become famous, because by then it's too late. When they're young, the ones that have potential in the future to become that. It's just like a venture capitalist, right? You invest in people that you think might be big down the road. Right. Their influence is going to be big. Okay, there's something to that.
Yeah.
But I served something in the world that took me away from the world of ideas first and foremost and into the world of entrepreneurship. And that was, I had been imagining this pyramid of the way beliefs are formed, from like idea originators, and this comes right out of Hayek, to secondhand dealers in ideas, to sort of, activists and artists, and then like to the general public. And then their beliefs are shaped, and their beliefs determine the window of political possibility.
Sure.
But there's a whole bottom to that pyramid, and it's more like an iceberg. That top part is the small part. What's the bottom? The top part is ideas and how ideas shape beliefs. The bottom part is experiences and how experiences shape beliefs. And I started to observe things like the advent of Uber, for example. There have been decades of think tanks writing white papers about how taxi cartels are inefficient and immoral and whatever else. No one gives a shit.
No.
Uber comes out. You experience using Uber and you say, I like this. This makes my life better. Now the government says, we're going to ban Uber. And you're like, whoa, hold on. Right? Every government wanted to. Almost none of them were capable of getting away with it. Some of them were able to regulate it, and it's kind of gotten bogged down with some stuff. But like, people's tolerance for taxi cab monopolies went from totally tolerate it because I never pay attention to, nope, not going to tolerate it. You're not going to take away Uber. Not because anyone argued them into anything.
Sure.
They didn't imbibe any ideas directly or indirectly. They had a different experience. I remember hearing it, the Acton Institute has this great video called The Call of the Entrepreneur. And there's a story in there where this guy's like, he grew up in communist China, and he was like at a train station. He was like a porter for luggage, and he was like 12 or something. And he'd never been anywhere else. And he believed what they told him in school, that the rest of the world is a hellhole and that you live in paradise and whatever. A guy from Hong Kong came to the station, and he didn't know anything about Hong Kong, but it was in the outside world. It must be terrible. And the guy said, thank you. He gave him a piece of chocolate. He'd never seen chocolate before. He didn't know what it was. He ate it. He said, I tasted that chocolate, and for the first time in my life, I was like, he said, I knew nothing about where this came from, but if they were capable of producing something that was that delicious, I have to go there. Because everything he had experienced in his life up till that point paled in comparison. Literally tasted the fruits of freedom and experienced it, he didn't need to read a textbook. He wouldn't have read a textbook. If the guy gave him Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman, he probably would have done nothing with it and thought it was lies. He tasted something, and he's risked his life and smuggled himself in at like age 13 in Hong Kong. And now he's like a incredibly wealthy like business magnate in Hong Kong. But story, and he's crying when he's telling it. And like that just hit me. I remember that. And it was not long after that I left the think tank and I started Praxis, because I thought, I want to break this horrible monopoly on the minds of Americans, which starts at K through 12 education. And why do they go there? Because they have to get into college. And then they go to college. Why do they go to college? Because they have to get a job. And I thought, if I just try to argue people out of that and tell them, no, that's not the best way to learn. That's not the best way to get a job. Government shouldn't monopolize schooling. We should cut the amount of money that's going to, no one's going to listen to that shit, right? But if I say, hey, you want to get an awesome job? Here, I can help you do it. I've got a program that will do it cheaper and better. Right. And now people start doing that. And now more people know more people who have done that. Now more people start to say, why do you need to go to college if you can go to some of these other programs and get a job that's just as good, better, faster, cheaper? Now, if you don't need to go to college, people start to say, well, what's the point of chasing grades in high school? Now, all of a sudden, it's like, why am I even in high school? And you suddenly, that's at least that's my vision, right? That's my dream, is that you undermine the monopoly stranglehold of people. If they've never experienced freedom, they won't fight for it because they don't know what it is. It's unknown to them. But if you give them a taste of freedom and let them experience it, suddenly they won't want that taken away from them. I think the internet's similar, right? Like, you had it now. Governments want to take it away and shut it down and regulate it. And they nibble at the edges all the time. But it's like, you can't just take it, at least not yet, right? And I think that to me is the hopeful thing. So rather than, I know I've been going on too long, but I told you already that talking is my.
It's fine. That's why I brought you here, man.
Rather than only focusing on trying to convince people through marketing campaigns directly that they should value freedom, I want to give them an experience of freedom. I want them to taste it, right? This is why the Soviet Union, by the way, they didn't just ban free market textbooks. They banned Marlboro cigarettes,
and jeans,
blue jeans, jazz music. They banned the fruits of capitalism, just the ideas of capitalism. Because if people experienced those, they'd be like, I don't want this communist shit. I want to go get those jeans because they're so much better than the crap that we're pumping out, right? And so that was a huge breakthrough for me that took me down the entrepreneurial road. So my life mission is to make people free, including myself, to live as free as I can and help others live free. And I feel like one of the most positive ways to do that is to create alternative experiences for people that undermine the necessity for the state in all areas. I've chosen primarily education and career, but there's all kinds of areas where you can create alternatives to the status quo. And there's another dad joke for you. And I think that people's beliefs in ways that are less confrontational. You don't need to get them to admit that they believed something wrong, which people don't like to do.
Sure. I think you make an excellent point. I would summarize it as like, you want to undermine the current institutions, right? Because the current institutions they've been captured, or they are currently in control by people who don't necessarily have our best interest at heart.
Yeah, let's make them irrelevant. Let's make them irrelevant. It's like we could argue till we're blue in the face about defunding the post office.
Right.
Or we could just go and invent email and FedEx and DHL and make them less relevant every day.
Yeah. I mean, nobody, like, who even cares about the post? Unless you're mailing a letter the two times a year you do it.
The Queen of England at this point. It's like a figurehead that exists for historical reasons.
Right. And the same thing happened with the like you said, the taxi cab cartel, or the pendant, whatever. I think that's a really great point. That involves, though, like the creation of stuff. But the irony is, and this is where I kind of am like hitting my where I'm having my struggles is, Uber's been great. I love Uber. I lived in Austin, Texas when they got rid of Uber, and it sucked. It sucked really hard because I used to like to go out and drink on a Wednesday night, and then I could just take an Uber home, and then I couldn't do it anymore. And then it's like, oh, I'm not going to risk a DUI. So like it just hurts business. But like the vast majority of people who use Uber will then say Uber is terrible because it is a company, because all this stuff. So you're creating all these institutions that are immediately demonized. Like I lived in Austin, and everyone felt the pain, but I also lived with a very liberal roommate at the time who was like, well, it makes sense because they take advantage of the drivers, the litany of grievances, right?
Oh, look, so this is hard for guys like you and I, because we like We like good arguments and we like people believing things for good reasons.
Yeah.
But the economist in you should recognize revealed preferences versus stated preferences are really important. And so this is what's beautiful about the market approach. Even though almost everybody will be like, yeah, Uber shit, they should pay their drivers more.
But
They'll say that they value all these policies that would make Uber worse. And many have made Uber worse. But with their actions every day, they not only make Uber's existence and continued existence possible, they make taking Uber away permanently almost impossible. Now, Austin did it, at least for a while. You didn't shift the political window to zero regulations on ride sharing ever. It didn't go that far with the introduction of Uber, but it did go from no one is legally allowed to compete with taxi cab cartels. And there was no changing that window by argument because no one cared enough to, yeah, you should definitely be able to compete with taxi cab cartels, but maybe you still got to have all these regulations or whatever. You shifted it in a positive direction. People will say a bunch of dumb stuff. They'll say they hate imported goods, but they'll go shop at Walmart and buy imported goods. And what they do with their feet matters when it comes to what's politically possible. The rhetoric sucks. I agree. And I'm all for fighting the battle of rhetoric. But my realization was I think that is actually a less dominant factor. It's the one that gets all the attention because we think in words, we talk, but it's the less dominant factor in shaping what's politically possible than experiences people have. And I'll throw one more example out here. And I know we're wrapping this up and I'm rambling, but
no, keep going.
I came across this. I think a friend shared it with me. It was written like, I don't know, maybe like 50 years after the Revolutionary War. Some journalist went around interviewing all these people who had fought in the Revolutionary War for the side of the Americans. And he was like interviewing these farmers. What caused you to take up arms against, England, which was like the freest empire in the history of the world at that point, just about, maybe not, but it was pretty good. But like, you rebelled against them. Was it that you read Thomas Paine? Was it that this, and he's asking this farmer, and this farmer's like, no, we didn't really read anything. Like we read the Bible and that was it. I don't know about all that stuff. He said, but we just had always lived free. Like I was like second, third generation here in this country. And like, we were free. And all of a sudden somebody came and said, no, you're not. You owe us, whatever, stamp tax, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, I'm free. And if you tell me I'm not free, that's that's offensive to me. And I'm going to resist that. And I thought that was so powerful. It was like the anti-intellectual. It was like our Lions guy, Barry Sanders, when somebody asked him, how do you have such great spin moves to avoid tackles? Do you practice this or whatever? He's like, no, I don't know. Just getting tackled really hurts. So I try not to. Right. And it was like, and this guy's like, because freedom was the default experience, the minute that was impinged on, he was like, not going to happen. I'll take up arms. I'll risk my life. And I think that's so powerful to me. Like, so I think about with my own kids, and I grew up homeschooled, and other kids who've been homeschooled or unschooled or different kinds of schooling, they don't think it's totally normal to them that when they want to go to the bathroom, they can go to the bathroom.
Right.
That's a normal thing. If my kids go into an environment, like they'll take classes sometimes, or like in some city rec league sports thing, and people there behave like people in public schools, they'll be like, you may not go to the bathroom, ask permission. My kids are offended. It's foreign to them. It feels weird. They're like, why are you demeaning to me? They'll even ask the teacher stuff like that. And the teacher doesn't know what to do with it because it's like this one kid has never been conditioned into slavery. And so to them, slavery is a foreign feeling and they will resist it because they have the experience of freedom as their default and they don't want you to take it away from them. If you've never experienced freedom before, no matter how many arguments you're given, you're probably not going to fight for it very much because it's still a big unknown to you. And so trying to convince someone who's only ever experienced slavery that they ought not to like their slavery is a very difficult task, that they ought to go out into the unknown and I can't tell you what it will be like, but trust me, it will be better.
Right.
So instead, if you can like give them a taste of that freedom, walk out of the prison and walk around the yard, see how nice this is out here. Yeah. You don't want them to take that away from you. Let's expand the amount of freedom that you experience. So anyway, people will still say dumb stuff. They'll still defend the system of slavery that they're in. But once you've given them freedom, they don't want to take it away.
Sure. I think, all right. So you make a great point. I have a counterpoint. Yeah. Because I think you're dead right in terms of like the things people do and how they act in their day to day. The voting booth. The voting booth is not like action. It's not even generally, I would say, like thought through. Sometimes it is, but a lot of it is just like, whose team are you on? What religion do you belong to? It is more of that, like, what do I associate with? It is that's where the marketing comes in, right? That's where the rah-rah slogans come in, is the voting booth. And I would argue that in our society where the government is just like, it's got its fingers in everything, and it can at this point can lock us into our houses for a year. So I don't know how much more power it needs. How do we convince people? Like, we've shown them the freedom, but will they vote for it? Will they?
I think the voting booth's irrelevant.
Interesting.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters at all. Let's take the case of the ending of the slave trade in Great Britain. This is probably the greatest single social movement in world history.
Absolutely.
We went from a world where slavery was the norm for all societies for all time, essentially. Mm-hmm. And everybody thought, just like people think about government today, well, it's an evil, but it's a necessary evil. This is just the way it is. Even people who didn't like it thought it was inevitable. We went from that world to a world where slavery is considered unconscionable, and nobody in polite company would ever mention it in a positive light, ever, especially if they wanted to run for political office. In like 20 years, peacefully, with no war, in Great Britain and all of their empires. Sure. The United States lagged behind and got into a bunch of shit. Yeah. It was messy there, right? But the end of the slave trade in Great Britain, which effectively ended it for most of the globe, was incredible, because what happened, it was not any changes in who the members of parliament were. That's not what happened. It was the same members of parliament at the beginning of that campaign who said, hell no, we're not going to sign this thing to end the slave trade. 20 years later, who said, oh, hell yes, we're going to sign this thing to end the slave trade. Because what do politicians do? They put their finger in the wind and they go where it's safe to go. They're a lagging indicator. They are the last indicator of broader social changes that have already occurred. Nobody was like, vote for me and I'll get in and I will do all the things that the political system refuses to let get done. No, you shift the window of what's politically possible and politically profitable, the politicians will follow. It doesn't matter who's elected. It matters what benefits them to do, what their behavior. Same with prohibition in this country. You get rid of it because society was down with getting rid of it. The politicians followed suit. First you add it, and then you get rid of it a few years later because nobody wanted it anymore. There wasn't a big change in who was elected. Most of the same people were in Congress and were in the Senate, and they just voted for it, voted against it, whatever. So to me, the voting booth is a giant bullshit distraction. I don't think the world gets changed through the voting booth ever. I think when the voting booth does anything that seems like a big change, it's simply the cherry on top, the visible manifestation of a change that already occurred in the window of political possibility.
Right. But isn't that the threat of the voting booth? Like, I agree with you. They've stayed there the whole time. But the reason their fingers in the wind adjusting to stuff is because they don't want to lose that power. They don't want to be voted out.
For sure.
Right. Like the voting booth, I agree.
They're conservative. They'll go where it's safe to go, but it's not only winning election, because in most cases, the elections are like completely gerrymandered and rigged and bullshit.
Yes.
It's maintaining a position of power in an ever-shifting world of alliances. And those alliances, they're mostly a bunch of insider bullshit, but they all hit against the ultimate backstop of the beliefs of the public. You can go this far, but no further. And if you shift where that line is to here, they'll all get in line. And even if you voted in all different people, the elected officials are like the least of the people who actually dictate what happens with government. I mean, there truly is a permanent bureaucratic state. Right. And again, the one thing they all have in common is they're all incredibly risk averse. Right. There's very few political entrepreneurs because the way the system is, they're safe. They're thinking about survival and preservation. And if you say to them, if you go this direction, you will get killed, right? This is, again, going back to IJ, they do this on a more local level. They'll take a law like the hair braiding, they'll turn it into, and they have a great blend of marketing, like you say. They'll turn it into, they'll tell the story. Hey, do you want them to take away this hair braider? She's doing this hair braiding, and they'll go to their customers first and foremost. Their government's going to take her away from you because they're pieces of shit. And now they've told this story of what horrible pieces of shit they are, trying to put this poor woman out of business. What judge, even judges who are unelected, they don't want to be the guy that says, yep, that's constitutional, because now they'll be the asshole. They don't want, no prosecutor wants to be like, I'm going after her and I'm going to have pictures of me arresting her. Right. They don't want to be the asshole. And even when those are unelected positions, it makes no difference. Instead, they're like, oh my God, that is terrible. We should change that law. Oh, how did that slip through? Right. And they jump on board. if the public's beliefs have shifted. So I just think it's a huge distraction to look to electoral victories.
Right. And I think you're right. The electoral victory part is not necessarily the point. I guess the point I was making is like the masses do vote, and it's that threat of the vote that does matter a little bit. And something that's, it's the threat of losing their power to some degree. And I do think you make a great point that they are small C conservative. Kind of like the realization I've had in the last year and a half is that on the conservative side of the aisle, people like to say that like the media is in the pocket of the Democrats, right? I think we've all heard that trope. I would say it's the other way around. Like the media controls politicians, the media and the bureaucracy, where the politicians, like you said, are small C conservative, and they're influenced by these other institutions that do kind of have the authority and the power to influence the masses.
Dude, they can like unperson you. I mean,
right? Or they can impeach President Trump. If you recall, the first time, Nancy Pelosi didn't want to do it, and then the media called for it, and she did it.
Right, and like he's basically been unpersoned. Like so again. Okay, so what? He won the election and whatever. I don't know if he did anything that was any different than Hillary would have done, but then he loses the election and basically loses everything in terms of his political relevance, certainly. Even his platform culturally. Now, I'm sure he'll probably, start up some news network or whatever. But like, that to me shows you, even a guy who got whatever he got, some 70 million votes or some absurd amount of votes, that isn't sufficient to grant him some kind of voice. So there's different forces at work. And I think those forces, again, they will get away with what they can. They will test and they will condition and they will say, look, there are forces that would say, let's triple taxes tomorrow if we thought we could get away with it. Let's take away everybody's guns if we thought we could get away with it. And so like what determines whether they can get away with it is ultimately the beliefs of the public. And again, it's complicated. There's a lot of factors involved.
Right. And I think that's kind of like the beast I'm wrangling with right now is like, what does influence the public? What is that?
Yeah.
I agree with you. It is the institutions, the disruption stuff. Huge. Agreed. That is, that will hurt people like in their pocketbook, in their time, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that's everything.
It's not everything. It's definitely not. I think Go ahead.
I was about to say, I do think there's, and call me crazy, but I think there's a religious aspect to this that feels like the left is ready to martyr themselves for what they believe, whereas the right does not. The right, I can't think of a single person on the right who's like, I guess the people who did the January 6th stuff might be, which maybe there, but that was weird. I don't know. They wore costumes.
Even that, I don't know any details, but and I don't really follow the news, but the few things that I've seen, it looks like mostly a bunch of goobers walking around taking selfies and here's, look, conservatives fundamentally are conservative.
Right. It's in their nature.
They don't want revolution because they're scared revolution means unknown.
Right.
We overthrow something and then what? Let's conserve what we have. And so they're very, very reticent to be revolutionary.
Which by their nature, they almost can't be.
Exactly. And sort of progressive, modern liberals are the opposite. They love revolution because they always have this belief, this optimism that it will be better. Whatever we're revolting against, we'll come up with something better on the other. And that has both good and bad sides as well.
Right.
So I think trying to play those two sides against each other is very difficult. Like, okay, we love freedom. And maybe right now the people who are trying to take away freedom more are on the liberal side. So let's try to rally conservatives and get them to be more revolutionary.
No,
I don't know.
It's like trying to get a sheep to be a lion, like it's just not
totally. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a weird time though, because I feel I have to really work at optimism now, and I've never had to before.
I was going to ask you about that because you are a very like spunky person, I would say. Like you have a smile to you, a positive energy, and you're struggling with that. Like it's hard.
Always come naturally, and I've always been, not just in personality, but just in outlook. Like hugely optimistic about the future of myself, my companies, the world, culture, whatever. Like I feel like, I see nothing but opportunity and potential. I'm not myopic. I don't think that things inevitably march towards good or anything, but I think like I see the power that individuals have to go in that direction. And I see all these positive things. I think I've realized over the last year, and at first this was hard. Now I'm dispassionate about it, or then I was dispassionate about it. And now the final phase is, can I be optimistic about this? But I think I've come to the conclusion that whatever was the United States, not that the United States ever lived up to its myth. It didn't at all. No. But the myth itself was really beneficial. Whatever that myth was, is dead. The United States empire is effectively dead, but you can slowly bleed out for a really long time. So it could take hundreds of years, maybe
like the Roman Empire took hundreds of years.
Totally. I mean, you look at like even within the United States, like the city of Detroit was like wealthiest per capita in the world in like 1950. It didn't just instantly turn to shit overnight. It just slowly, and by the way, the city of Detroit still exists. People still live there. Yeah. There's still a government there, right? But it's a shell of what it once was. It just like, right? So I see the United States empire, whatever that means, is in the decline phase. And that like surprised me when that occurred. Like I felt like it was like occur?
When did
getting encumbered with decadence and whatever, and getting, and again, I'm not conservative by nature, that I don't think the past was better than the present. Sure. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, we need to go back to the past.
Well, that's nostalgic. I wouldn't call that conservative. I would call that nostalgic.
Yeah, nostalgic. But conservatives are like, stand athwart history and yell stop. Like we must stop moving forward. I'm not like that. I love progress and moving forward, and I love new technology and all that stuff. I'm not like we should be agrarians, whatever, farmers. Yeah. But it was like, oh yeah, okay, like this is weird. So now what does that mean?
What was the moment where you realized that? Like what set you off to be like, this is the we've crescendoed. How do you know we're in the last act, like finishing off? Like what did it for you?
Yeah, it was a very distinct moment. And then since then it's just been more and more confirmation. And then I've wondered why I didn't notice it sooner. But so I actually took like a 2-week break from all screens at March 1st of 2020. For various reasons. And I was
what did you come back to a surprise?
Like a health reset. I come back online March 15th and I'm like, cool. Oh, this will be fun. I'm like, hey, March Madness starts soon. Let's pick my brackets. And then it's like, no, March Madness has been canceled because of coronavirus. And I'm like, no one would. Yeah. That's well outside the window of political possibility. You can't take sports from Americans like that. Like that's ridiculous. And it was like, no, everything's canceled. The entire world, all at the freaking same time, is literally locked in their own homes as prisoners, and nobody cared.
No one.
Everyone was like, okay. I was like, okay, I guess you can arrest the entire country at once for no reason. Yeah. And everyone will be like, meh. It was like, whoa. The possibility of that totally shattered where I thought the Overton window was. Mm-hmm. And now I'm kind of like trying to figure out if there even is one anymore, because it feels like impossible. Like where are we? And I felt like that would not have been possible in what I believe the idea of America was. Whatever it is now, it's something different. Dude. It's completely broken any last threads of connection to the mythical origin story. Not that the real origin story lived up to that, but the myth itself, we're on a new myth now. The old American Empire myth is over. Now we're on a new myth, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's weird. And I'm trying to come to grips with that. And then once I come to grips with it, learn to find the opportunity in it and not become defeatist.
Sure. I think that's great. And I do agree that the myth is gone. Like the founders revolted over taxes. All right. We are so beyond that.
Over like a 1 penny tax.
Yeah. On tea. Like, come on. They were like, and then like we've been locked in our houses for a year, and there were some protests. We had a Viking. We got a guy in a costume who was led into the Capitol. I think that was there is something to that. I'm in agreement with you as well. I don't know if I had any sort of like moment, although I got to say the timing of you unplugging probably during the most impactful 2-week period in American history in the last 70 years, maybe 100 years, who knows, is hilarious.
Maybe it's my fault.
Maybe you did it. Had you just stayed on Twitter.
I had one tweet that if I could have just one tweet,
you could have saved us.
Yeah. Everything would have been, I was the last line of defense, man.
Oh, yeah.
John, man, this has been a ton of fun, man.
Dude, this is a blast. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me for this is great. I enjoyed this. This was everything I hoped it would be.
Good, good.
Although I didn't get to ask you about Bitcoin, but maybe some other time.
Yeah, if you want, I can give you like Bitcoin thoughts in 2 minutes.
Okay, here's what I want. I want someone to explain to me why Bitcoin matters without saying the word inflation. Because everyone says that to me, that it's like, have you heard about the Fed? And this is why I need Bitcoin.
Yeah,
and it's like, there's a lot of other things you can do besides Bitcoin to hedge against inflation.
So I have a very contrarian take even within the Bitcoin world. And it wasn't always this way. Like I'm sort of persona non grata among a lot of sort of mainstream Bitcoiners. But I think there's a reason that everyone will tell you it's just inflation, because Bitcoin, as in BTC, the current protocol implementation of BTC, which is very, very different from what Bitcoin began as, it literally offers nothing except for a limited supply. Everything, every other attribute of it has been stripped out. So much so that I would argue Bitcoin as BTC poses no threat whatsoever to the financial status quo. It can't, because of its protocol. You can't meaningfully transact on chain with a large enough volume of people. So you have trusted third parties reintroduced, and everyone, you're already seeing this with the Cash App, with PayPal, with Robinhood. Everyone is just sending IOUs, Bitcoin IOUs, on private ledgers that are unaudited, and they absolutely can be inflated. We've seen with Tether, the stable coin, that's totally unbacked. It's not the same thing as a Bitcoin IOU, but it's in a similar vein. So even the inflation proof, even if BTC itself is limited to 21 million coins ever, no one will be using BTC. They almost already aren't, because you can't. It's too slow and costly, because the protocol has been in my mind taken in the wrong direction starting in 2017, but even earlier. But so that's my very contrarian take. But I think all the other attributes of what Bitcoin could do were basically stripped away. What I think is possible, and there are other implementations of Bitcoin and other coins that are trying to do this, whether they'll get anywhere or do anything on a major scale, I don't know. I'm not as optimistic as I once was, but I hope they do. What Bitcoin fundamentally did was solve the Byzantine generals problem, which is a sort of a technical thing, but it essentially allowed for information that is decentralized, that is shared all over the place, to be provably accurate by all parties, right? So you don't need to have trusted third parties,
right,
which opens up incredible number of things, right? It's not just a coin with limited supply, but I think the two biggest game changers that Bitcoin allows are, which you can't do on BTC, but you can on BCH and BSV, and then there's some other coins trying to do similar things, are decentralized data, which means all of your, like you could literally rebuild the entire internet, decentralized data and micropayments. And you could rebuild the entire internet and all of its business model, theoretically anyway. There's no technical reason that you can't on Bitcoin, where you, the individual, own all of your data and you decide who gets access to what, and you get paid for that access directly. You can, as a creator, upload this video to the blockchain. No one can deplatform you because it's on a distributed public ledger. You can charge people whatever price you want to stream it to themselves or download it, and you get the money directly as a creator instantly, down to hundredths of a penny. You can instantly have revenue splits between the guy who creates your logo for you. He gets 5% of everybody's download, right? There's all these crazy things you can do with micropayments and decentralized data that Bitcoin allows as the backbone. And when you do that, and you can tokenize things on top of it, et cetera, you can make specific pieces of things like smart contracts that Ethereum's trying to do. Most of those implementations, I think, are bad currently, but they're all possible. What Bitcoin introduced to the world makes all these things possible. And I think that is really, really compelling. But just buy it and put money in it because the price will go up, and then never use it. To me, that's just, I don't care that there's another asset in the world that's doing nothing. It's not threatening to upend any systems or create any new, as just a speculative asset, whatever. Right. If it goes up, good for you. You made some money. I've made money on it. But it doesn't bring any revolution that excites me.
Okay. That's great. That's good to know. Because people always compare it to like digital gold or whatever, but I'm always like, gold has like an intrinsic value. We as humans, we like this. I know.
I know you don't believe in intrinsic value.
You know what I mean. I phrased it poorly.
There's utilitarian uses for it. Like
right.
You can use it in manufacturing. People like to wear it as jewelry.
Right. I phrased it poorly, but that's what I'm getting at. Is like as a commodity currency, it is used as a commodity.
Well, and I would say like Bitcoin.
That's my problem with Bitcoin. When people tell me to like invest in it because it is a commodity currency, it's like, what's the commodity it is providing?
Well, okay, so it has a value. Again, I think you can use it for so many more things that you currently can't with BTC. But the ledger itself, a distributed public ledger, and like Bitcoin's interesting because it's both the method of payment itself, the money, and it's the payment system, right? All in one. So like a payment system has value, like a PayPal or a Visa network. And dollars also have value as a medium of exchange. Bitcoin combines those two features along with an accounting feature, along with distributed data, along with micropayments that are not possible on any other payment system. Like literally, I can send you a 1/100th of a cent instantly for almost no fee. You can't with BTC, but you can with the original implementation as it was designed. So there is like a lot of other value things that are native to the digital age that all other forms of money fail at. You can do with Bitcoin while at the same time making it scarce, which was always the problem with other forms of digital money, is that they couldn't be provably scarce. So to me, that's the combination, and just removing all the other benefits and saying, look, it's digital scarcity. Well, it's like, well, what the hell? Who cares if you have a scarce number of units you made up that don't do anything? You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm sure I'll catch some fire from all the maximalists out there.
Well, I don't know. That's something we can talk about at another time, because that to me is the interesting part about Bitcoin. I don't really care that it's going to the moon. I want to know how it actually does something besides just go up.
Me too. Yeah.
Cool.
The magic internet money that it was when I first discovered it in like 2012, that's got potential, and there's a fighting chance. It's an uphill battle that something like that can still take place, but I don't see it with what's currently being hyped everywhere.
And that's also a reasonable thing to invest in too, I would argue.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, anyways, I will wrap it up, but that's like great. You satiated my desire to know more about Bitcoin from that point of view, instead of just the whole inflation hedge, which is the main narrative thrown out there.
Yeah.
So awesome, Isaac. I appreciate the time. What do you want to plug stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you're on the job market, go to crash.co. We can help you find a job. Otherwise, you can find me, Isaac Morehouse, at Twitter. IsaacMorehouse.com, and I'm if you have any questions or anything, hit me up. I'm a pretty open guy.
Awesome, dude. Thank you again. This is great.
Rock on, man. Good to talk.